Hello and welcome to Reality Check. I'm Ross Coulthart. Or should I say, welcome to the end, the official end of what was meant to have been Alien Invasion Day. Yes, for weeks now on the internet there's been speculation that there was going to be some kind of alien invasion, based on a prediction that 39 days from the interview between President-elect Donald Trump and Joe Rogan, there was going to be some kind of conflict between humans and aliens. Well, for all we know, that might actually be happening, because whilst we're talking, there is, over the skies of the world, the most extraordinary display of something, objects in our skies, the frequency of which I've never had reported to me to such an extent before. It's off the charts. It's absolutely amazing to be receiving reports, as I am hourly, minute by minute, from people in countries all over the world who are saying that they are seeing objects, strange objects, glowing luminous orbs, orange orbs, blue triangular shaped objects hovering over often sensitive military facilities. Now, of course, the biggest area of reports has been in the United Kingdom in recent weeks, and we know that over some of the most sensitive bases in the UK, RAF Lakenheath, RAF Feltwell, bases where the United States allegedly stores nuclear weapons, there have been sightings of strange drone-like craft for some time. Now, why do I say drone-like craft? Well, I only say that because intelligence community sources have been in my ear for some time, assuring me that these are not aliens, they're not unidentified anomalous phenomena. They are reportedly, according to intelligence insiders, known foreign adversarial drones. They must be highly advanced drones based on what I'm hearing, but the claim is that they are foreign adversarial nation drones. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't necessarily believe everything I'm told by members of the intelligence community, and I think we're entitled to be sceptical in this case. Not least because we know from intercepted military communications, before they were digitised and encrypted when they realised their comms were being monitored, some of the clever skywatchers around RAF bases in the United Kingdom picked up on the fact that at least one pilot was referring to UAPs, not drones. So if the pilots themselves that are being sent up to intercept these objects perceive them as unidentified anomalous phenomena, not drones, what aren't we being told? And that's the bigger issue here. As Ryan Graves from Americans for a Safe Aerospace has told us repeatedly, he's the former pilot who was involved in the extraordinary spate of sightings off the East Coast involving deployments in training exercises where they witnessed weird anomalous objects. He's been warning for a while that we need to know for sure that our aerospace is safe. And at the moment, the US government, quite transparently, and neither can the British government, nor my country, the Australian government, give that assurance in the face of what we are seeing in our skies. For 2 weeks plus now, I think it's up to 16, 17 days, there have been sightings of craft of some kind. Some of them apparently do have an audio signature that is consistent with some kind of propeller or helicopter blade. They're not jet turbine, but they are hovering in some cases for many, many hours at an end, basically continuing to hover over very sensitive military facilities with apparent impunity. Now, whatever you say about whether these are UAPs or drones, that's an issue. That's a national security concern. And some of the people in the national security complex would basically say that's a threat, because until we know what they are, they are, by definition, a threat. And so, whilst people often get accused of pushing a threat narrative about unidentified objects, that's what they're talking about here. And I think that's the big issue here that a lot of people, including most of the mainstream media, are missing. Let's compare what happened in February last year, in 2023. One Chinese spy balloon set the entire US media and the Congress into hysterics. They went off their rocker with concern about this unwarranted intrusion into American aerospace. And we still don't know what the remaining 3 objects were that were shot down over, I think there was Alaska, then there was the Yukon, and then there were 2 parts of the United States, the main continental United States. But there's still a mystery over 3 of those objects. What the hell were they? We still don't know. Has the media been inquisitive about it? Not at all. That's the issue here. Why was there a hullabaloo and a big alert and concern about those objects and not these current objects that are still hovering with impunity over some of the most sensitive military facilities on the planet? And right now, we are teetering, sadly, on the edge of a third world war. It's not an overstatement to say that we are in very dangerous times. And I suspect that this is the real backdrop to why we're not being told what's going on. I think the US knows full well what these objects are, be they foreign adversary drones or UAPs. I still think that's a possibility. But if it is a foreign adversary drone, and they're operating with impunity over our airspace, over sensitive military facilities, not only is that a national security concern, for the United States and for the United Kingdom to directly accuse, say, Russia or China, which I'm told is more likely, to say that China has been deploying drones over sensitive British air bases is tantamount to accusing China of an act of war. And that's why we don't want to identify, that's what I'm being told at least, that's why we don't want to identify the foreign adversary nation that we suspect is involved in this. Some people are suggesting it's Russian, but my friends from Polish intelligence tell me they doubt the Russians have anything like this kind of drone technology, which appears to be able to intercept to avoid intercepting jet fighters. There's a great image, I honestly can't vouch for its authenticity, but there's a great video of what is alleged by one of the Skywatchers to be an F-16 fighter approaching one of these luminous orbs at high altitude, and you see the orb zoom off in the face of the advancing F-16 jet. So are these drones, if they are drones, really faster than F-16 jets? Because if that's the case, it means there's a genuine issue of national security concern here, because these objects don't appear to have the kind of propulsion systems we're used to for drones, and they seem to be displaying full lights. They're showing, in many cases, what some people describe as navigation lights, but which one source of mine is suggesting might in fact be ISR sensors, perhaps some kind of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance sensor that's being used over these sensitive bases. Is it a coincidence that just a few months ago we were told that the United States would be forward deploying nuclear weapons because of the heightening tensions with Russia into some of these UK bases? Is that why a potential foreign adversary, or maybe something stranger, something more anomalous, is now taking a close interest in these bases? We simply don't know, but I can tell you the conspicuous thing is the absence of any comment by either the United States or the British Royal Air Force. It's like they've decided to clam up. And that's concerning. There are reports, for example, that the SAS, the Special Air Service, and the Special Boat Service, 2 of Britain's most elite military regiments, have been deployed around some of these bases to try and capture the suspected criminal enterprises that are launching these drones from adjacent forests. But if that's the case, why haven't we caught any? And add to that what we're seeing at the moment is a spate of drone sightings, not just in the United Kingdom, or supposed drone sightings. We're seeing anomalous objects, strange unidentified objects over countries all over the world. My inbox has exploded in the last few days. I'm getting messages from Russia, Kazakhstan, China, across Southeast Asia, Japan. People are reporting to me sightings of anomalous, strange objects that the governments are calling drones in some cases, but which are not explainable as known drones. And so the big issue is, what the hell are they? And we just simply don't know. That's a concern. Here's one, for example. We were told that the British aircraft carrier HMS Elizabeth in Germany, on the 22nd of November, there was a security incident at the port of Hamburg when the Queen Elizabeth was docked under heavy protection. The German armed forces had a secure military zone around the vessel with Homeland Security forces, and they reported a suspicious sighting of a 1.5 metre by 1.5 metre reconnaissance drone hovering over the 284 metre long aircraft carrier. They confirmed the incident, the Bundeswehr, and identified the drone as likely engaged in espionage activities. They deployed, and this is the crucial thing, they deployed what's called HP-47 jamming equipment, capable of emitting signals to disrupt and neutralise drones by forcing them to either land or return to their operators. But that attempt to intercept the drone was unsuccessful. So the bottom line is, whoever it is that's operating these craft, these objects, over very sensitive military facilities, not just in the UK, but also clearly in Europe, Germany, and in multiple other countries around the world, including continuing reports in the continental USA. The people that are doing this are not being caught. They're operating with obvious impunity, and moreover, the technology that they are using is not susceptible to the known drone interdiction technology, which normally involves firing a signal at the craft and intercepting the signal that disrupts the operator's control of that drone. One thing that I am told is that we cannot use broad spectrum high pulse microwave weapons on these objects over sensitive military airspace. And that's because obviously there are fighter aircraft and other aircraft operating in the vicinity. One thing I know, and interestingly enough, I know this from people who tell me that HPMs, these high pulse microwaves, have been used against known non-human technology. One of the risks in deploying these weapons is that if you fire them in the vicinity of a UAP, you knock out every aircraft in the vicinity. And so you can't do that over sensitive military airspace when you've got your own fighters in the air. But that doesn't explain a lot to me, because I know, for example, there's a company that's just set up, it's a US company called Anduril, Anduril, and they have fantastic anti-drone technology, including something called the Fury, which, if you look on their website, demonstrates a capacity to, at extremely high speed, knock out individual drones or UASs that are intercepted inside sensitive military airspace. That's what these are purpose-built for. Your governments and mine have funded these anti-drone, anti-US operations at a cost of many hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars over the last few years. And I think we're entitled to ask, why the hell isn't it working? If these so-called drones are attempted to be being intercepted by the Americans and or the British, and we know that the British Army has deployed special elite units that are meant to be involved in counter-drone efforts, why haven't we seen one brought down? There is, I admit, one report by a local woman that says that she's aware that a drone was brought down, I think over RAF Lakenheath, RAF-based Lakenheath. But if that's the case, we've seen no official confirmation of that. And it could very well be that the reason why they're not confirming it is because they don't want to essentially put themselves in a declaration of war with whatever the foreign nation is that was responsible for deploying this technology. Because the moment that you do identify that foreign adversary nation, you are essentially declaring that they have committed an act of war against your nation. And with national sensitivities the way they are at the moment, the last thing I think either Britain or the US want to do is precipitate any kind of confrontation with Russia or China. Could it be, perhaps, that China has developed technologies that are far in advance of what the Russians have, and that what they are trying to do is provoke a conflict between the Russians and the Western world? Is that possible? Would they do such a dastardly thing? Certainly it's being suggested to me that these drones, if that's what they are more likely Chinese than Russian. And apparently we know this because of the very distinct audio signatures on these purported craft. Add to that the fact that, don't forget, just a few weeks ago, there was a very extraordinary incident where a Chinese vessel, which is almost certainly linked to the PLA, the Chinese army, was involved in dropping its anchor and dragging its anchor and snagging and severing very important internet cables in and around Scandinavia. Now, that incident still is largely unreported. It's an effective act of war by what we suspect is a Chinese army vessel, controlled at least by one crew member who is Russian. Why has there not been any attempt to board that boat? And I suspect the answer is because we don't want to provoke international tensions any more than they are at the moment. So let's put the drone issue to one side for a moment. Let's not ignore the fact that there clearly is still, separately from the drone issue, there have been for many months now, and we've reported on this in Reality Check, anomalous objects clearly identified as anomalous by pilots and military personnel operating over very sensitive military facilities, particularly in the United States. And one of the reports that we did was reports of anomalous objects being seen by locals over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. And the Air Force, of course, has persisted in maintaining that these are drones. But not one shred of evidence has been presented to supply any proof at all that these are drones. In fact, the Pentagon has conspicuously failed to provide any proof at all to back up its claim that these objects are drones. You might recall a few weeks ago I did an interview with the Tedesco brothers, John and Jerry Tedesco, who do a lot of research off Long Island, and they are, I think, probably foremost as technical experts in an understanding of anomalous objects that are being seen on very sensitive air routes in and out of JFK Airport coming into New York. And they're aware of a lot of the orbs that are now being seen in and around New Jersey, off the Long Island coast, and they continue to maintain that these objects are not drones. They do not comply. They're not consistent with any known drone technology. They do move in anomalous ways, and what they're seeing and recording on their hyperspectral cameras and their numerous other sensor systems that they've paid for themselves, they're not US government funded, they are raising a very serious question. And I note, as this goes to air, it's just been reported on NBC that the objects are again being seen over New Jersey this evening. And that's very interesting because the FBI is now involved. The FBI has approached John and Jerry Tedesco, and I know that they are taking an interest in the New Jersey sightings as well. There are some very sensitive homes under New Jersey, including, I think, one associated with the incoming president. I wonder if that's just a coincidence. Is somebody sending a message or something sending a message? We simply don't know because our governments aren't telling us, and more importantly, our media is not curious enough to continue asking the question. And that's the issue. The issue, yet again, is the failure of much of the mainstream media to question the drone assertion. If the Pentagon spokesperson gets up and says that these are drones being seen over US and UK and other countries' very sensitive military facilities, over the Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier in a dock in Hamburg in Germany, that's a national security threat. That's a bigger threat than any kind of balloon being seen over the continental USA in February 2023, as we know. So why isn't it being aggressively reported and investigated by the media? Well, because much of the media allows itself to be tamely led by the nose by their intelligence sources. They don't want to burn their sources who are giving them cozy little stories about Ukraine, about Russia, and they're allowing themselves actively to be misled. The same organisations that misreported on COVID, and misreported on the Iraq War and have misreported on intelligence issues for much of the last 60 or 70 years. It's time for the public to start asking questions itself, to start doing our own research, our own independent investigation. And to that effect, I want to commend some work done by an organisation called Enigma Labs, with whom I had a very brief flirting association. I got to know them really well in their very early days, but they've done some great work. They've been investigating the orbs and spheres that have been seen over the continental USA, and they made a point of mentioning that in Arrow's November report, they showed that orbs and spheres are frequently reported, with most sightings occurring between 15,000 to 25,000 feet. And what they went on to report, that they've been speaking regularly with fighter pilots, active service fighter pilots at US Air Force bases. And these men and women are telling Enigma, anecdotally, that the sightings of these metallic looking spheres in particular are concerningly still continuing. Often multiple times a day they're appearing when they're flying and doing training exercises. They're saying, again consistent with what Arrow told the Pentagon and told Congress, they're appearing between 24,000 and 28,000 feet, which is a lot higher than most commercial drones. If this is a foreign adversary actor, it's using technology far beyond what we know commercial drones are capable of. Now, we know that those kind of long-range, long-distance drones exist because the US has been using such autonomous drones for a very long time in warfare. But it does raise the possibility or probability, if this is a foreign adversary, that these are extremely grave incursions. But it gets more interesting in what Enigma reveals. They did an analysis on these spheres and orbs to see what they could learn, and they discovered that there's been an incredible number, a total of 6,226 total orb or sphere sightings were submitted to the Enigma Skywatching Network between December 2022 to September 2024. So that's just under 2 years. 6,226. And when they ruled out ones that were a little bit more uncertain, there were 4,467 approved orb sightings that they were able to confirm were genuine sightings. But this is the good part. When they drilled down further, they found 322 metallic orb sightings. They were metallic, metal, or silver orbs. Now, Reality Check fans will recall that we've taken a very, very close interest in these metallic orbs. I've reported on a guy in Texas who claims that he has a silver sphere, which he has seen operating and moving under its own steam. And I've had since then a ridiculous number of people contact me from all over the world who tell me that they've been seeing metallic spheres across Europe, Eastern Europe, Africa, India, Australia, and a lot of the continental USA. But have a listen to some of this more information from Enigma, because there's been a lot of metallic spheres reported by military pilots adjacent to or over very, very sensitive US, continental USA military bases. So at the Naval Air Station Joint Reserve Base Fort Worth, Enigma reports on the 1st of August 2023, a metallic sphere was seen flying low, then disappeared into the sky. Near Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State in May 2023, a silver grey sphere flying at low altitude. July 2024, a 3-foot-high shiny oval. January 2024, a silver ball following a plane. Several sightings also near Eglin Air Force Base, which we've reported on, in Florida, June the 4th, 2024. Silent silver orbs in formation. And again, June 12th, silent silver craft appears after a flash. Now, John and Jerry Tedesco, who we reported on from Long Island, they got an intriguing image of what looks like an orb literally tailing a commercial aircraft as it either exited or entered JFK Airport on the approaches to New York. This is a concern. These are objects operating inside highly sensitive airspace. God help us if there's a collision involving one of these objects and a commercial or military aircraft. That's why this is an issue. That's why Ryan Graves' Americans for a Safe Aerospace is such an important initiative. And that's why civilian and military pilots need to stop worrying about the stigma and start reporting these objects more. So it's to be applauded, frankly, that Enigma's getting reports like these. And I'd certainly like to hear from anyone who's seeing these metallic orbs in particular. They're very interesting, because they have no visible means of propulsion. They don't display a heat signature showing either a propeller or a jet turbine. Nobody can see a seam on them. Nobody can explain how these things propel themselves, but multiple people are seeing them in our skies. Why do we continue to ignore this as a national security issue? We jump up and down and get hysterical about Chinese balloons entering American aerospace in February 2023, but we don't talk about metallic spheres. Why is the media allowing itself to be so controlled and gagged? Why doesn't somebody at the White House briefings for the president or the Pentagon briefings develop a spine or a new pair and actually start asking questions? Well, hang on a moment. What is all this? What are these drones? If you say these are drones, why do you say they are drones? What evidence have you got they are drones? If these are metallic orbs or spheres being seen by your pilots, and if you think that's nonsense, why are you putting pilots in charge of $100 million aircraft if you think they're lunatics? This is the issue. It's time for the media to start asking seriously aggressive and hard questions, because we are being misled and lied to. That's the issue. So please keep your sightings coming in. I am overwhelmed. I'm very, very interested to hear more. And I can tell you there's something in this. But at the moment, I'm not ruling out the likelihood that these are foreign adversarial drones that have developed some kind of advanced technology that is able to operate with impunity over some of the most sensitive airspace in the world. If that's the case, it's a huge concern. It's actually, frankly, it's a bigger concern if it's Russia or China than it is if it's friendly aliens. Because if it was aliens, and if they were malevolent or ill-disposed, I'm pretty sure they could have wiped us out a while back. So what else are we talking about on Reality Check this week? Well, as you know, I've been in Egypt for the last few weeks. It's been a fascinating journey, and I've got a lot to report. And we're preparing a couple of shows which will be going to air in the next few weeks. But in the interim, I thought it was time, because of the mounting number of questions I'm getting on my website and on my YouTube channel, I thought it was time I started addressing some of the questions that people have long been asking. So let's deal with some of those, the Q&As from our audience. The first one is from @ZSKI1. Do we know if these are high-tech military drones and UAPs have flashing lights and no one is questioning that? He makes the point. Absolutely right. Look, we've kind of addressed that already. We don't know if these are high-tech military drones. My sources are telling me they are. I don't necessarily believe them, and I think we should be skeptical. I mean, in one of the cases I've seen, you've seen a F-16 jet reportedly engaging with what looks like a luminous orb, and presumably the jet is operating at near supersonic speeds, and that orb was able to outstrip the speed of that jet considerably. Explain that, please, with known drone technology. One question that comes up next is from AUGGIED6760. One question that is not asked is, who protects and conceals UFO and alien evidence? Who does this, and who carries on with this suppression in successive generations? Who heads and operates this covert and secret organisation? Okay, let me be on the level here and say that if you'd asked me that question 3 or 4 years ago, I would have thought you were a raving lunatic, a tinfoil hat nutter. I now think your question is entirely reasonable, because I do believe that there is a cabal of individuals, and they are individuals. They're not departments or entities. They are individuals, carefully selected individuals, who believe that they are entrusted with a national secret and they're determined to keep it, even if it's operating illegally in defiance of the oversight rules of Congress. I think there are people in the US Air Force who know full well that we are being visited by a non-human intelligence. How do we explain the statement that was made by Dr. John Kozlowski, the new and very well spoken for incoming director of ARROW, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, who gave evidence to Congress in November, asserting that there is no evidence of extraterrestrial visitation to planet Earth? Well, I want to make the point. I think it's entirely possible that Dr. John Kozlowski is being lied to by people within the program who know full well what's going on. And I wouldn't be surprised if, since his November appearance, Dr. Kozlowski has been apprised of much more interesting information that perhaps has changed his perception. And it would be interesting to see him put under oath and questioned more rigorously by a Congress that is now more aggressively pursuing this subject with its bit between its teeth. I am told that there are individuals in the US Air Force who have been concealing this secret for years. It's largely driven out of the US Air Force because of the US Air Force's control of the subject since the 1940s, and indeed probably a lot earlier. Another thing I've learned very recently is that it is very, very likely that the US has had possession of non-human technology since even before 1941 Cape Girardeau, and possibly even before the magenta object was retrieved by the Italians in the 1930s. I wouldn't be surprised if the US has had technology since the turn of last century. Go figure. But what has happened, I believe, is that there is a Presidential Executive Action Directive. I think they're called PEDS. Forgive me if I've got that acronym wrong. I really don't care. I'm sure there will be somebody who will pick me up on it. But for those of you who were following Michael Schellenberger's evidence in the Congress when he gave evidence under oath to the Congress in November, he referred to a program known as Immaculate Constellation, which, it is my understanding, is a very small part of a whole series of secret codename programs that constitute what we would call the legacy UAP program. But nonetheless, it's a very significant one. And I am now aware of who Mr. Schellenberger's source is. I realise now I was speaking to that source many, many months ago. I wish them the best. I will be protecting their confidentiality, but I can tell you, I can vouch for who they are, and I think the fact that they have come forward is extraordinarily significant. But anyway, just to make the point, when Schellenberger made the statements under oath to Congress that he believed that this Immaculate Constellation was a program that was protected by secrecy by the Defense Department, it was formally denied by the Pentagon that Immaculate Constellation is a special access program controlled by the Department of Defense. And you know what? The Pentagon's spokeswoman was telling the truth. And I suspect she knows full well what the real story is. And the real story, I am told, very, very reliably, is that there is a presidential order, action directive, whatever you want to call it, that was signed in or around 1954 by President Eisenhower that enshrined the secrecy of the legacy UAP retrieval and reverse engineering program. This has been kept a secret, even from Congress, in breach, by the way, of Article 1 of the US Constitution, which requires that Congress have oversight of everything it's paying for. This has been done in breach of those congressional oversight rules because of this somewhat lame and, I think, unsupportable presidential order since the 1950s. And I think that it's going to be a very interesting day of reckoning when Congress finally, if it ever does, develops the spine to ask the question of the White House, is there a presidential order which has essentially allowed this issue to be kept secret at White House level for many, many decades? And if that's the case, how do we justify that commanders-in-chief like Barack Obama, like Jimmy Carter, like Bill Clinton, notice they're all Democrats, asked the hard question, is there a secret UAP program? And they were told there wasn't. Certainly Obama was during his administration, and so was Clinton. But they've found out differently subsequently. They know they were being lied to, and they were being lied to because of this ridiculous presidential executive order. On what basis, you would ask yourself, and I'd love a constitutional lawyer to answer this question, on what basis could a former president or a previous president lock in a lie to all futures commanders-in-chief to stop them from being briefed into this program? On what basis was that a good idea? Last time I checked, America is a democracy, nominally. On what basis could a commander-in-chief requesting information about the UAP legacy program be denied that information? And that's what I'm alleging happened and continues to happen. Presidents have been lied to. Congress has been lied to. That should be an issue for the American public. And by the way, the American public should be asking themselves, what about the JFK assassination? Is there a link between the UAP issue and JFK's murder by the national security state, which I'm in no doubt happened? I do not for one moment believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone assassin, and multiple sources in the intelligence community tell me I'm right. I think when we resolve the issue of UAPs, when we blow open the JFK files, I think we're going to solve both mysteries. Okay, moving on. Next question. At DAARK, at Dark982, question for Mr. Coulthart. What is your take on why the NHI do not just reveal themselves? Do you agree with the idea that there is an agreement for delayed or complete non-disclosure? Because if true, I would find that to be somewhat confusing behaviour on behalf of the NHI. I also think that if they were waiting for us to be ready, that maybe we wouldn't be seeing them in our skies, or maybe at all. Thanks for the work you do, and hoping to hear your thoughts. Okay, Mr. Dark. I think there's a really interesting explanation that I'm beginning to hypothesize. This is only a speculative hypothesis on my part, but it is based on work that I am doing that is increasingly focusing on what I believe is a consciousness connection to the UAP phenomenon. I do think that there is a link between what we call psychic phenomena, telepathy, or psionics, as is the more neutral term that's used by the military and the defense community. I do believe that there is a connection between human psionic abilities, telepathic, psychic abilities, and consciousness, and that the UAP phenomenon is tied into that. And I suspect this is one of the largest reasons for why this is being kept secret and for why the NHI are not overtly showing themselves. And my growing hypothesis, it's just a hypothesis because there's a few things I can't tell you right now that I'm going to be reporting on in coming weeks, and I'm very excited to be bringing you that story. But I do know that the Air Force has been working on psionics for many, many decades. They never stopped investigating the power of the human mind and consciousness ever since the Stargate program and the remote viewing program. I know it's been poo-pooed. I know there's a George Clooney movie based on John Ronson's book called The Men Who Stare at Goats. And I know all the supposed debunkers say it's BS. But I can tell you, it's not BS. I've seen it for myself, and it's real. And in forthcoming weeks, you will see why I say it's real. And I believe the United States Air Force has knowingly deceived Congress, successive presidents, and the American public, and the world about what it knows for far too long. It's time for this story to be told. Now, coming back to the question from Mr. Dark, I think the NHI are showing themselves in our skies to twig our consciousness, to make us humans aware of capabilities that many of us don't even realize we have. And I've seen those capabilities demonstrated in recent months. I know they're real, and I frankly don't give a flying fig what the debunkers or the skeptics or the trolls would say about that. It's real, and they will soon be eating humble pie. The capacity for the human mind to engage externally with some kind of uber consciousness has been speculated about in science. Go and have a look at the work on microtubules. Let's have a look at what modern science is speculating about a quantum connection between the human brain and an external consciousness. That's where we're going in this. So what if UAPs are merely a manifestation of something that is above and around us, a consciousness? Some might call it God. Yeah, I know, this is heavy stuff. But what if the purpose of its engagement with the human race is to slowly twig our awareness and to encourage us to use abilities that we don't even know we have? I'm very interested in hearing from people who were part of the GATE program 20 to 30 years ago, who found themselves in rooms with US Air Force officers and strange psychologists in white lab coats, showing them on occasion strange, apparently non-human objects. Yes, this has been happening. Young kids, prepubertal kids, have been misused in experimentation by our military in experiments designed to develop an understanding of how to engage with the phenomenon, with a consciousness. And I think at the same time that NHI consciousness is trying to engage with humanity individually. I've spoken to so many people. I had a message this morning from one person who's an very senior US Air Force person working in a very sensitive area, who told me that they had psychical abilities and they'd never spoken about it. But when they told me about their sighting of a gigantic craft, I said to them, by any chance, do you have psychic abilities? Have you ever had an intuition or a precognition? And they said they were very moved by my question because they'd never really spoken about it. But yes, they have. And everybody I talk to tells me about intuition, precognition, some kind of second sight, some kind of insight that gives them an ability to understand or engage with things in a way that humans can't quite understand. And I think that's what lies behind our understanding, or our growing understanding of the phenomenon. I think that if these are craft, if they are craft at all, they are a manifestation of a consciousness that is trying to engage with humanity. And I think, interestingly enough, the evidence that I am acquiring suggests that these craft can only be operated by people with those psionic abilities. Watch this space. More to come on this. Now, the other question from Mr. Dark was, are there agreements? And are those agreements perhaps constraining why and what we can be told? Now, that's a good question. As you know, if you were a watcher of the interview I did with David Grush back in June 2023, David Grush, to a very limited extent, referred into what he was allowed to reveal through his DOPSA, his Defence Office Pre-Publication Security Review. He referred to unspecified agreements. Now, I've been investigating that, and I do believe it's possible, plausible, I haven't confirmed it, that sections of the US military concluded agreements with a non-human intelligence. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was an agreement of non-disclosure, perhaps some kind of Star Trek-like prime directive where the NHI didn't want humanity informed. Wouldn't be surprised at all if that was the case. I haven't had it explicitly said to me, but I have had multiple sources refer to agreements. Okay, so let's just examine that. Firstly, if such an agreement was made, how could it possibly be legal? How could the whole planet be bound by an agreement that a bunch of jumped up, hubristic, arrogant men in the 1950s or the 1940s concluded with a non-human intelligence? Why would they have any right to make a decision on humanity's behalf? And moreover, if the Congress and certain presidents were not properly informed, as I am confident they were not, and in complete breach of Article 1 of the US Constitution, then those officers of the US Air Force are in serious breach of their oath to the US Constitution, which is an act of treason. Treason. That's what we're talking about here. So if these people are aware that people like myself and others are on their tail, and that disclosure is imminent, that Congress is now getting close, if I was you guys, I would be thinking very seriously about coming forward, because you are going to face treason charges if your government doesn't decide to exonerate you or put you before a Truth and Reconciliation Commission where you are given immunity in return for telling the truth. You face the very grave probability of criminal charges. And yes, I do think there are people who should be going to jail as a result of what I've learned about the legacy program. Experimentation on children, murder, intimidation, bullying, threats. Not a good look, guys. Okay, moving on. The next question is from @JohnnyM6338. This is a long one, but it's a good one. Ross, while I can understand and agree with the need to keep the technology portion of the information secure for obvious reasons, why is it necessary to overclassify the NHI biological materials and the scientific information classified? That information is essential to advancing our understanding of astrobiology. That's essentially blocking our scientific advancement, which I don't believe any government has the right to do. And I can't see how releasing such information and samples to the research community can in any way jeopardize national security. Can you? I mean, come on, we know they have these materials. Yes, we do. And they know that we know that they do. So why would any government, let alone our own, deliberately withhold scientific research advancement? Now, look, this question goes on and on and on. It's about 2,000 words, but I can answer it. I completely agree with you. I can tell you, Johnny, that I am in touch with scientists inside the legacy UAP retrieval program. That is a program that has retrieved non-human craft, alien spacecraft, and that these people are deeply frustrated that they cannot share their science with other scientists and with humanity in general. They also think it is immoral that we do not know and that the Pentagon and the US government choose to lie to us. What they want is for their science to be shared with other scientists so that we can achieve breakthroughs that allow the materials science study of these objects to get a breakthrough. Because my understanding is that when they've actually looked at these craft, the technology within them has often defeated materials science. It's an assembly at the atomic level of which we are not yet capable. That's the issue. But what we have learned is the ability to psionically engage with non-human technology and operate it to our own advantage. The fear that has been expressed to me by scientists is that, as happens all too often, America, Russia and China are all involved in a quiet Cold War, as David Grush admitted to me last year, competing to develop these technologies for military advantage. Now, I don't want to condemn the military people that are doing this. That's the way they think. You know, when this was first discovered and when the realization was first achieved that we had technologies that were far beyond known human science, it was during the Cold War, and it was realized that the best way of securing an advantage over our foreign adversaries was to essentially develop those technologies in secret. But I know, because I'm talking to people who know all about it, the Russians have their own reverse engineering program going with their own retrieved technology, and so do the Chinese. And what is driving a lot of the bellicose rantings from the American military at the moment towards the Chinese is that the Chinese, I suspect, are far more advanced than the Americans in their development of the materials science technology. Oh, and could this have something to do with the foreign adversary drones hovering over the United Kingdom and the United States' sensitive military facilities? Just maybe it could. Have a close look at some of those objects that have been videoed in recent days that appear to show blue plasmatic glows. Leave it with you. So, yes, I do think it's unjustifiable that either the technology or the biologics are being withheld from the public, and particularly from science. But, and again, I can just hear the outraged, bellicose ranters online accusing me of covering up for the dark state. The simple fact is, I do think that there are technologies that lie behind this that ought properly be kept secret. Just like with nuclear weapons, I don't want to know, I shouldn't know how to make a thermonuclear bomb. I don't want to know how to make, scalar weapons. Remember that term, scalar weapons. Wouldn't that be terrible if what apparently is the subject of fictional speculation was in fact real? And wouldn't it be terrible if at least two of the nations on this planet that constitute semi-superpowers, so-called, were in possession of such scalar weapons? Wouldn't that be a threat to humanity? And wouldn't it be terrible if our first contact with a non-human intelligence was to essentially malignly use the technologies of theirs that we've discovered for developing an adversarial advantage over foreign countries? That's the issue that lies behind, I think, a lot of the secrecy, Johnny M6338, that is explaining why this is being kept quiet. I hope that's a sufficient answer to your incredibly detailed question. Okay, so at KenTanch2601, I have two questions. One, with all the advances in photography technology, why can't we get a good close-up of any of these UAPs? And two, did they send any jets up to intercept these unknowns? I don't believe they were drones. I believe the pilots say what they saw, and you're dead right, Ken. We know, because we've heard the communications, at least one of the pilots described what he was seeing as UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. So why does the US Air Force and the British Air Force continue to maintain that these are mere drones? Perhaps they are drones, but whatever they are, they represent an advancement in technology that is far beyond what we've known publicly to date, and that's an issue of concern. Now, why do these objects not show up clearly in photographs? I think that was your first question. I think one of the explanations that's been offered to me is that the very nature of the propulsion system that these objects are using, these craft are using, involves a plasma, a distorting plasma that actually glows around the object. That's why you'll often see a blue plasma glow around these spheres, orbs, triangles, or discs. Apparently that plasmatic glow is the object flitting in and out of space-time, which might explain why they are often translucent or sort of semi-visible. Did they send any of their jets up to intercept these unknowns? Yes, they did. We know that they did because we've seen videos of it from skywatchers in the United Kingdom. And thank you very, very much to those stalwart people that have been going out night over night for the 16 plus days of sightings over the United Kingdom, who've been capturing intriguing images of objects being engaged with by Her Majesty's jets and the jets of the US Air Force. Okay, next question is Thomas Boomer 9809. Bravo, Ross, well done, sir. Could you possibly visit Skinwalker Ranch in the future? Oh boy, I'd love to visit Skinwalker Ranch. And for those of you who've watched Reality Check in the past, you would know that we interviewed Brendan Fugel a few months ago, and Brendan very kindly extended an invitation to me and NewsNation and Reality Check to come and film at Skinwalker Ranch, and I will be doing so. I would love to do so. I just have to find the time to do it in between dealing with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of emails. It's just insane right now with all these sightings off the charts. I'm also very interested in areas like Skinwalker Ranch outside of Utah. I mean, Skinwalker is a fascinating location, but I know it's not the only one. I'm doing a documentary which will be going to air on NewsNation and hopefully the CW network in coming months, which will be exploring at least one other site in the United States which involves extraordinary anomalous activity and possible interdimensional portals. And I think there are sites like this all over the world, including here in Australia. And if anyone knows about any of these, I'd love to hear from you. I'm really interested in hearing more about interdimensional portals. You can get hold of me on my Twitter site. There's an email listed there, muckraker, MUCKRAKER, @protonmail.com. If you know anything about any of these interdimensional sites where anomalous activity is being seen, particularly where there is a heavy military presence, and I'm told there are often heavy military presences around these sites, I'd love to hear from you. Okay, at Paul Fogarty Songs asks, "Hi Ross, we've corresponded once before. I wonder if you've looked at the phenomenon of religion and compared its acceptance by so many around the world, and yet UAP is treated in a totally opposite way. Love to hear your thoughts." Thanks, Paul. Well, yeah, I mean, we have done reality check episodes on this, notably with a theologian called Paul Thigpen, talking about excerpts from the Bible and other religious texts, which do appear to refer to things that I certainly interpret, Paul doesn't necessarily, as UAP. Paul takes a very literal interpretation that these are angels and demons, and who knows? He might be right. Certainly there are people in the Air Force of very evangelical Christian bent who think that the phenomenon ought not to be being investigated because it does involve angels or demons. I don't know. I simply don't know. What I don't like, though, is the notion that a religion would tell us that we're not allowed to investigate. Anything that assumes blind faith is totally antithetical to good science. And I'm sorry if that puts me in contradiction with people of religious faith, but I'm sorry, I just think we should question. We should always ask. And if a religion was to punish us for asking a question, then there's something wrong with that religion. I never as a child accepted the idea that we should unquestioningly show faith in the notion of a Christian God and all of the ideas that went with that. I used to get into terrible trouble with my divinity teachers for asking questions, and I don't see why we should. Any good religion and any compassionate God, if a God exists, would surely understand that humans have a right to ask questions. One of the other questions I've got here is from @cbarry4068. I ask, what's the best proof of Bigfoot or the best evidence? I've looked for it and I can't see any. It's not as though I'm not open-minded to it. I just don't see what others do. That's a good question, Barry. I'm not necessarily a Bigfoot believer, but I'm also not necessarily a Bigfoot disbeliever. Coming back to a moment to the idea of interdimensional portals, one idea I've flirted with from speaking to people like Brandon Fugel and others who've worked in the NEDS and ORSAP investigations at Skinwalker Ranch is that there do appear to have been anomalous creatures, entities, emerge from apparent portals on that ranch that were seen by reputable scientists, non-loopy individuals, and that these objects and entities did appear to correspond to what we would call Bigfoots. Is it possible that there is a Bigfoot that essentially emerges from interdimensional portals and comes into our area to collect food or game or minerals of some kind? I have no idea, but I wouldn't exclude that possibility. Science is increasingly suggesting that such portals do exist. We know that black holes exist. Why is the idea of an interdimensional portal something that is so antithetical to good science? Certainly, if you have a look at the ancient Aboriginal rock paintings or the rock art of indigenous Native Americans, it's quite clear that they were describing things that I would certainly describe as portals. And I've had the privilege of speaking to people of Native American background, and they certainly describe portals existing today. So I wouldn't rule out the possibility of Bigfoot. It's just that, like you, I haven't seen the evidence. Okay, last couple of questions. At Wilhelm Hess 1348, is it just nuclear weapons or nuclear atomic energy plants? Reports have been made of hundreds of UAP sightings at atomic energy plants. Yep, you're quite right, Wilhelm. We are not talking about UAPs just being seen over nuclear weapons facilities like Malmstrom Air Force Base, as was reported by numerous US Air Force former personnel. We're talking about multiple sightings, often over the same facility, repeatedly reported over many, many years by staff at these facilities, including power plants. And I commend once again to people the fantastic book by my friend and colleague Robert Hastings, UFOs and Nukes. It's a fantastic read. We interviewed Robert a few months ago on Reality Check. He also very kindly gave us the link to his documentary that's linked on his show. And you will see there that he has extensively reported the extraordinary frequency of these anomalous objects over almost every nuclear-linked facility in the United States. And I can tell you, because I'm in receipt of information from countries like India, Pakistan, France, Britain, China, there are equally objects of an anomalous nature being seen over nuclear facilities in those countries as well. It's not a uniquely US phenomenon. Perhaps it's more reported, and perhaps more authoritarian countries make it harder for their citizens to come forward to talk about it, but it's certainly happening all over the world. Last question. At Beekneed, Bekneed, has Sheehan published, posted, shared, or otherwise made public the tracings he made from the crashed craft photos? It's been 45 years since he made the drawings. I'm wondering who else has seen them. Okay, so what he's referring to there is my friend and dear colleague Daniel Sheehan, a civil rights attorney of renown who heads the New Paradigm Institute out of Washington, D.C., which is a lobby group for UAP transparency that he works on with Jim Garrison and Tyler Zaradnik. And they're doing a sterling job exposing the UFO cover-up, which is a UFO cover-up. And what Danny's referring to there is a seminal incident which happened to him as a young lawyer. He had an association because of his background working with the Jesuits in the Vatican Church. He was known to the White House as somebody with connections to the Vatican. And because of that, perhaps, he was approached by a woman called Marcia Smith, who was with the Congressional Research Service, which had been tasked by President-elect Jimmy Carter to investigate the UAP phenomenon. It's a great story. I suggest you read about it in my book or watch one of Danny's interviews about it online, including the one I did with Danny many months ago. What you'll find is that Danny tells the story of how he was briefed into the fact that George Bush Sr., before he became president, when he was the director of the CIA, was apparently one of the gatekeepers of the legacy program secrets. And when Jimmy Carter, as president-elect, before he was inaugurated, was asking for a briefing on UAPs, he was formally refused a briefing by George Bush Sr. This isn't something that George Bush Sr. in his lifetime ever denied. It's never been denied by anybody. I've given plenty of people connected with him an opportunity to deny it. It's a fascinating story. Marcia Smith won't comment, but Danny Sheehan says that eventually he was approached by Marcia because of his work that he'd done with NASA, and he was asked to help her investigate the UAP phenomenon. He asked for access to the Blue Book files, the hidden Project Blue Book files, and incredibly, on a quiet Saturday morning, on a holiday weekend in America, he was told to go to an uncompleted office of the National Archives or the Library of Congress, the Madison Building as it's now known, and there in an uncompleted basement he was met by men in black suits and given access to archives of microfiche. And when he searched those microfiche, in impatience he started looking through the voluminous files for any kind of photograph, and what he saw was a photograph of a craft which had strange markings on the side. And although Danny hadn't been allowed to take in a pen and paper, he'd sneaked one in and he surreptitiously traced those symbols onto the back of his shorthand pad and sneaked it out past the men in black. Now, incredibly and frustratingly, and I've badgered Danny to death about this, he lost the tracings. He lost the tracings. So the reason why he can't say what they mean after 45 plus years is because he just doesn't know. He's never been able to recover the tracings. But what is interesting is that when he did his recollection of those tracings, What he drew bore a very close resemblance to the symbols described by an airman called Jim Peniston, who said that this was what he saw on the side of a similar craft at the RAF Bentwaters base, Christmas 1980, which is another story entirely. I've probably gone on for far too long. I think we've crossed the hour. We have. But I hope you enjoyed this edition of Reality Check. I'll try and answer more Q&As in the future to come. I can tell you we've got some very, very interesting programs to come on my visit to Egypt, and we've got some sensational stories to rock the new year with in 2025. I'm looking forward to seeing President Trump honour his promise to investigate the deep state, because, oh boy, there is one, and the UAP mystery is central to it. Crack the deep state, you crack the UAP mystery. It's very, very important. If any of you are asking what you can do, keep the pressure on your elected representatives. Let them know this matters, because truth will out. And we'll be here on Reality Check to keep you informed. Thanks very much. Tonight, a nation on edge.
What is going on in New Jersey?
That's the question on the minds of Americans.
It was the size of a school bus, literally the size of a two-car garage.
As a national security threat looms in the skies.
This is a truly bizarre story and series of events. Bottom line is that the FBI is utterly clueless about what is occurring.
Lawmakers fed up with a lack of answers from the federal government.
They're saying no threat to Americans.
They're saying no threat, but how the hell do they know? They don't know anything. They don't know what it is. They don't know where it come from.
I do think it's ridiculous that they're not shooting these things down.
We don't really have control of our U.S. airspace.
And the White House keeping the people in the dark.
Has the federal government ruled out that these are controlled by foreign entities?
Yeah.
And do you know if they're conducting surveillance over these
So
areas?
I cannot make any predictions or comments about that.
Rich McHugh on the ground as deputies take action.
There's one right over my shoulder, right there.
Tonight, we ask and answer your most pressing questions. Do you believe that what you are seeing is potentially evidence of a non-human intelligence?
Yeah, I think we have to consider that.
And one thing is for sure.
These risks are not hypothetical.
The threat is real.
Hello and welcome to this NewsNation primetime special investigating the drones mystery unfolding in our skies. For months now, there have been mystery objects hovering over US airspace, including over sensitive US military facilities and increasingly over crowded civilian areas such as New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and other parts across the continental USA. Tonight, we're going to try and get answers for you. My name is Ross Coulthart. I'm based in Australia, and it's part of the reason why we're telling you this story, because it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just happening in the US, it's happening in almost every country in the world. And what's becoming patently clear is the White House, the FBI, and all of the investigative agencies have no answers. So tonight, we're on the ground trying to get you those answers. Our correspondent, Rich McHugh, has been on the ground in New Jersey all week, talking to people, including gathering this fiery exchange.
I walked out because it was worthless. It was the biggest amateur hour presentation I've ever seen about anything, okay? It was ridiculous. There were no answers. Every question that was asked by a member of the state legislature, great questions, no answers, no resolution. They don't know where the drones are coming from. They don't know who's doing it. They don't know why they're doing it, but they say there's no credible threat. It was annoying to be there. Here's the most frustrating part. The colonel of the state police said that he had a helicopter of his flying over above one of these drones, a 6-foot drone or something, I can't remember exactly what he said, and he felt unsafe for his helicopter, so he just let it go. Just let it go. Where'd it go? Who knows? You know, didn't want to follow it because he didn't feel safe. Is that not the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard? It was just excuse after excuse, and we know nothing. It was infuriating, and I got up and I walked out.
You've been in the service, right?
Yeah, I was an attack helicopter pilot, Apache helicopter pilot in the Army, and I helped stand up the initial unmanned aircraft training battalion in the aviation sector of the Army. So I know a little bit about what I'm talking about, and these guys are not doing the job they need to do to figure out what's going on, and that is the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and the state police.
And Rich McHugh's also been spending time with local law enforcement who are searching for answers and not getting many answers at all from the federal government.
Thanks, Ross. You know, when this story first appeared a few weeks ago, as a resident of New Jersey and as a journalist here, I didn't pay it much attention. I thought it was a bunch of knuckleheads and this would be all kind of, exposed by now with a laugh. But the experience I had changed the way I feel about this completely. What we saw was more sophisticated than I think anything I've ever seen before. Take a look.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 lights, 6 lights.
I didn't believe what I was seeing, but what was I seeing? We're here in central Jersey. We've been looking for the past hour. I think we've seen about 40 or 50 of these drones. In fact, there's one over my shoulder right there. One after another, these drones appeared in the night sky. If you look real close, they look like fixed-wing aircraft, about 8 to 10 feet wide, colorful, white blinking lights.
That is not a plane.
Definitely not an airplane, but what was it? Hours earlier, I was invited to join the Ocean County Sheriff Department. They launched their own drones to see if they could intercept the mysterious aircraft New Jersey residents have been reporting in recent weeks. The department says these mystery drones evade detection because they don't give off heat like regular drones.
Why do you think that is?
We don't know. It's just something that we haven't, it's not something that we've had our hands on. It's not something that we've experienced.
Something they hadn't experienced until now. One of their officers called 911 after seeing 50 of them come off the ocean.
Advised after we made contact with that officer that there were 50 that came off the ocean.
50?
50. That was my reaction also. There were 50 that were coming off the ocean.
And this is a sworn officer?
A sworn officer, yes. We contacted state police, we contacted the FBI, we contacted the Coast Guard, at which point the Coast Guard went out with their boat and they reported seeing 13 following their boat. And then the Coast Guard also advised that they went over them about 300 feet and had a wingspan of about 8 feet.
I see one right here.
Did I see the same thing that officer saw? I'm still not sure. What I can show you is this video. What I can tell you is I've never seen anything like it before.
Wow.
And more than a month since these reports started, the federal government doesn't know what they are either.
What's your message to the White House?
My message: come to the Jersey Shore. I know it's wintertime, but come see what we see, and then, maybe have a better appreciation for why our residents are concerned.
Now, the Ocean County Sheriff has this industrial-grade drone they put up. They said they were tracking one of these drones, but that drone easily outran theirs and disappeared, which is, if this is not the military, then it's even more terrifying, and we need answers now. Back to you.
We're crossing to Joe Khalil, our White House correspondent, and he's there in the halls of Congress looking for answers.
Ross, if you thought that lawmakers, both senators and House members on Capitol Hill, would have more information than the general public at home, think again. Yes, they are privy to classified and private briefings sometimes, but in this case, they're telling me they are also being kept in the dark and don't have any real clarity here.
That's not a plane.
What are they? Where are they coming from? Do they pose a threat? And why haven't we brought one down yet? All questions the public might have watching these drone videos over New Jersey and part of New York. Questions that even lawmakers on Capitol Hill, who are privy to classified and sensitive information, are asking too.
We see them. We don't know where they came from or who is controlling them. What are the rules of engagement? When are they perceived as a threat that can be engaged? And I am seeking clarity on that.
Congressman Adam Smith, the top-ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, says he got a private briefing this week on the situation. But, like dozens of others NewsNation has interviewed or spoken to, still has several outstanding questions about the nature of these drone sightings.
Afternoon, everybody.
From the White House podium, National Security Council spokesman Admiral John Kirby tried to offer some clarity.
We have no evidence at this time that the reported drone sightings pose a national security or a public safety threat. or have a foreign nexus.
Kirby also said neither the White House nor local law enforcement have corroborated any of the sightings independently, adding some sightings have turned out to be lawful manned aircraft rather than mysterious drones. Comments for which he got pushback.
How can you credibly tell people that there is no public safety threat, there's no national security threat, that there's no reason to believe that a foreign government is involved?
Because the analysis thus far in an investigation that is ongoing has not revealed any national security or malicious intent or criminal activity.
No matter what the aircraft are, lawmakers in both the House and Senate tell NewsNation the focus should shift to what the Pentagon should do about it.
You've always got to kind of strike the balance.
North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis tells us, of course the military should be mindful of residential areas, but if the drones can safely be taken down, they should be.
I personally believe that any drone that's in the skies should be able to be taken down if there's not some way to authenticate them. Even a small 4 or 5 pound drone can represent a serious threat. So we've got to have situational awareness.
This week, in a House Armed Services hearing, several House members pressed officials from the FBI and national security sphere about why action hasn't already been taken.
What if they were carrying chemical weapons or something? We just don't, I mean, this could be a much worse conversation we could be having right now, because these things have been flying all over New York, New Jersey, over military installations.
I know you have the capability, you've put out press releases, to identify and bring down drones. Why can't you deploy them at least to the ocean? Bring one of these down, find out who's doing it.
In the void of real information from the White House or the Pentagon, some have been led to speculate. Congressman Jeff Van Drew made waves suggesting the drones came from Iran, only to later walk it back, saying that's only an assessment without definitive evidence from high-level officials with whom Van Drew says he has spoken. Here's what he told us.
High-level individuals who have top security clearances, who say what they believe it very well may be a foreign adversary.
Not definitively.
No, not definitively. You have to have proof.
Yeah.
We had to shoot one of these things down or take it down and find out what it is they're recording, what they're doing, how it's made, where it's from.
And several lawmakers are now trying to get off the sidelines and get more directly involved in some kind of response. The new senator from New Jersey, Andy Kim, actually went along with police and followed some of these drones himself, recording them and saying they are not on the flight tracker app, meaning they're not manned aircraft. They are mysterious drones to which we still don't know an origin. Ross?
Okay, I'm now going to bring in the mayor of Mine Hill Township in northern New Jersey, Sam Morris. He's about an hour's drive from downtown New York, and he's got some very interesting perspectives on the local concern, the mounting local concern in and around New Jersey about these anomalous objects. Are you seeing any objects? I'm being careful not to call them drones. Are you seeing any objects over any sensitive military facilities in your area?
Yeah, we are. We are about 5 miles from Picatinny Arsenal, which is a weapons development center here in North Jersey. We're an hour and a half from what used to be called Fort Dix, McGuire Air Force Base, and we're hearing that there are sightings of these things over all the bases. There's no delineation or respect for those boundaries whatsoever. Now,
sir, obviously there's been very careful statements, including non-statements from the Pentagon on this so far. I mean, I'm incredulous, to be perfectly honest, that there's been no definitive statement from the Pentagon, one way or the other, about what they can tell us once and for all about these objects. Does that concern you? Does it concern you that we're just not getting answers at the moment?
That is, it's not only concerning, it's the absolute crux of the problem. I have what started all this on Sunday was about 25 fellow mayors of mine and I in Nitz County decided we kind of were fed up with no answers. So we issued a press release. Sunday morning, we issued a letter to the governor and legislators and federal officials on Sunday evening and started intentionally stirring this up strictly over the fact that we're getting nothing. We understand as mayors, we understand as elected officials, we're not involved in police or military operations. We understand that we stay far away from those things because for safety reasons, security reasons, but to not at least let us know that they know what is going on. Hey, we know what's going on, you guys, and you're going to have to trust us, but this is not unknown to us. They are essentially stating it's unknown to them, to the FAA, to the Homeland Security, and to the Air Force and FBI are saying, we don't know.
The official line consistently from any of the agencies has been that these are drones, that we're led to believe that potentially these are either drones being directed by some unfriendly actor from a foreign adversary nation. But the consistent line has been that we know that these are drones. Are you satisfied on the basis of the answers or the non-answers you're getting from any of these agencies that they actually know for sure that these are drones?
No, no one is. No elected officials that I talk to, they're either colleagues or friends, or we all know each other. We try to work well with each other, regardless of party. None of us know anything. And while we understand that we have to have some faith, right? We have to have some understanding that the people who should know these things do know. They're saying they don't. The FBI has put out that they don't really know what's going on. Governor's office, and I take the governor at his word that he's also very frustrated. So that is what's disconcerting. If I could elaborate, what's upsetting the average resident, and me personally, and others I know personally, is there's something over our heads physically, right? And these things don't weigh 5 ounces; they can weigh up to 300 pounds. And if they lost power and fell on us, or fell on your car windshield driving down the road, or fell on your house from 400 feet, it's coming through your roof. It's coming through your car. It's coming through your deck. It's going to hit you and hurt you with good probability. And yet we're being told we really have no idea what's going on up there. But they're supposed to know what's going on up there. That's their job.
Well, Mayor Sam Morris, we hope we can help get you some answers, but thank you so much for talking to Reality Check and NewsNation, and
Appreciate
we look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Up next, our favourite civilian scientists, John and Jerry Tedesco, tell us what the FBI is telling them they need to hear. And also, the Hill correspondent, Marek von Rennenkamp, gives us a historical perspective on these unusual objects in our skies. I'd now like to welcome some good friends of Reality Check, John and Jerry Tedesco, my favourite citizen scientists. You'll remember them from a Reality Check episode a month or so ago where we brought them on to talk about the extraordinary work they've been doing off the coast of Long Island, where they both live. And what they've been doing is, with their own gear that they've bought at their own huge expense, they've been observing anomalous phenomena off the coast of Long Island ever since, I think, about 2 years ago. John and Jerry, welcome back to Reality Check. What can you tell us about your impressions of what's been recorded over New Jersey in the last few weeks?
Hello, Russ. We're happy to be
first,
here. Happy to be back.
here.
I'll let you go.
It's crazy. A good number of the objects are similar to some of the things we were seeing off the coast, or like these twinkling lights, rotating lights. Then there's the other mixed bag where you see something that resembles navigation lights. They're drone-like objects, or appear to look like drones.
Right, and the question is whether or not it's the same thing. Whether that all of this stuff that people are observing, are they in fact two different objects, two different sources of as far as where they come from, or is it the same, or is it maybe a U.S. response to it, having drone activity out there, drone-like.
So kind of recon or surveillance.
Yeah.
So I know you guys, it's a delicate subject because, of course, the contact from government agencies is always slightly covert and discreet. But I know you guys, from our previous conversations, have been approached by the FBI, and that there's an FBI team that's long been investigating the UAP sightings in and around that part of America. Have you been in touch with the FBI and Homeland Security in recent weeks or recent days after these anomalous, strange incidents over New Jersey?
We have. There's not, unfortunately, there's not a lot, that we can share publicly.
We could say it's been productive.
Yeah, but it's been productive, and there's definitely a genuine concern out there about this stuff.
And a senior representative of the FBI, Mr. Wheeler, has admitted they don't know what these objects are. That's a breathtaking admission.
That's very unsettling.
Yeah, that's an oddity. That's an oddity.
So one of the other things that you guys have kindly given to us just in the last few hours are videos. Can you talk to the videos that you've included in what you've sent to us?
You want to mention the first video?
Right. So the first, let me just pull that up because we had just sent it off, and I believe the first video is a dark object. What we're considering dark objects because of the way they're presenting to our eyes, our hyperspectral equipment that we're looking at them. There are some objects that can be seen visibly, and it's the colorful lighting, bright, luminous presentation. These objects, they can't be seen with the naked eye, and in some cases, they can't be seen with night vision equipment. You have to go deep within the night vision spectrum in order to see them. And we noticed that over the last year of examining and investigating some of these aerial objects, the presentation is very, very difficult, even in the night vision cameras and the night vision goggles. You really got to you focus your eyes on them. And it's got to be some degree of motion. If there's no motion, you probably wouldn't be able to pick it out. They seem to be, lack of a better term, almost like they seem to be absorbing light. They're not reflecting light at all. There's some cases where they come up, they're darker than the rest of the environment.
Almost like a black body source.
Like a black body source.
And so this is what you've captured presumably with your hyperspectral camera, is that right?
Exactly. This is with a near infrared camera and the night vision cameras.
And I want to mention something else. When John says that it's even difficult to see some of these dark body, we call them dark bodied objects, or maybe it's some kind of black body, a black body coating on it, or something that absorbs light, doesn't reflect light very well.
Right.
We were using shortwave infrared that goes much deeper into the infrared in order even to notice these, to see these.
Right.
Or at times we had an object that we were focused on in the sky off the coast of Long Island, and there was another second object sitting right next to it. We didn't notice it until we hit it with a high intensity torch, and it actually evaded the torch. But we didn't even see it in the near IR.
That evasion issue brings me to something that I think even the New Jersey Governor Murphy has acknowledged.
Yes.
He's been quoted as saying the drones are very sophisticated. He says the minute you get eyes on them, they go dark. You're seeing the same thing.
Right. And we're trying to understand the statement that he made. What aspect of it that it's evading, or whether or not it's somebody pointing a light up to it, or is it just once you're making contact with these things, they just kind of evade your space. You evade your.
Well, it's how far how much you're talking. The minute you get eyes on, what does that mean? Does it mean that a helicopter approached them, or they shined a searchlight on it? Even if it goes dark, let's say it shuts all its lights off. There's radar. You could detect them by radar, or you could use a searchlight. So, I mean, how dark? What exactly is he talking about? That's the question.
Right.
We're seeing these objects actually change the spectral range.
As scientists, do you believe that what you are seeing is potentially evidence of a non-human intelligence?
Yeah, I think we have to consider that. It's something that needs to be considered. I mean, we have to collect more data, but I mean, there's some bizarre features of these objects. So at least the technology is quite different from what we've seen previously.
And it certainly doesn't align with current day technology.
The changes in spectral signatures and the sudden appearances and disappearances, and some of the flight behaviors are very strange.
I'm looking forward to catching up with you in person when I get to America next year. Thank you once again for giving us your insights on these weird sightings over New Jersey.
That sounds good, Ross, and we welcome you out.
I now want to bring in Marek von Rennenkamp, who's a correspondent with The Hill. He's also got an interesting background in national security, having worked for the State Department. Let's cross to Marek now. This is a historical problem, isn't it?
Very much so. Not only does it go back several years, it goes back decades. And, I've been looking at some very fascinating old government records that I can just think of one series of incidents that J. Allen Hynek actually wrote about in his book, The UFO Experience. And there are some really astounding government documents that outline exactly what we're seeing. Unknown objects with blinking red, green, white lights hovering, moving up and down rapidly over nuclear missile silos in Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska. And oh, by the way, that exact same pattern and series of events occurred in late 2019 and 2020, where hundreds of people were seeing these objects.
This is, oh gosh, I'm so pleased you mentioned this. So this is the Colorado swarms, is that
Correct.
right? The Midwest swarms.
Correct.
This is really interesting to me because I've needled people in the intelligence community about those so-called swarms, which were seen by police, by military, local TV reporters, and everybody just goes, they clam up. They won't talk about it. Yeah. And I don't know why. I mean, the interesting thing is you're saying that the decades-old J. Allen Hynek sightings and the Colorado swarms, they're not just similar to, they're describing objects that are identical to these objects?
Now, if you look back to emails that have been released through the Freedom of Information Act, I'm going to quote directly. A Chase County, Nebraska, this is from 2019, 2020, a Chase County, Nebraska sheriff deputy reported observing 30 to 50 flying independently of each other with a larger, quote, mothership hovering for hours, directly from the memos, from the law enforcement memos. I'll do one more just very quickly. In Kansas, 2019, 2020, a law enforcement officer observed, quote, 10 to 15 drones that flew all kinds of patterns around a stationary drone, end quote. It flew right over him. He had night vision on, couldn't see it because of the bright lights, but, quote, it made absolutely no sound at all, even though the wind was calm, end quote. So that kind of, that similar flight dynamic, that pattern that we're seeing, gives me at least moderate confidence that the objects that were observed in 2019 and 2020 are the same, if not similar to what we're seeing in New Jersey now.
Marek, you've been very prominent in commenting on the growing preponderance of evidence to suggest that the possibility that the explanation for at least some of the anomalous objects that have been seen over the United States in the last 70 to 80 years is perhaps non-human. Are we talking potentially that these drones might in fact be a non-human intelligence?
Boy, we're touching the third rail here. It's tough to assess, right? Because there are consistent reports of rotors, fixed wing, right, noises and capabilities that appear consistent with pretty standard human technology.
Marek von Rennenkamp from The Hill, thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, my colleague and co-host Chris Cuomo had an interview with some of the biggest names in this UAP issue. That's next.
A lot of these drones, like the ones we're showing right now, you see navigation lights on them. You see a red and a green. You know this from boating and down, so they have the same things. Aircraft are the same thing that boats do. They have a red and a green. So it's not like they're from some outer atmosphere. Let me start with you, Mr. Mellon. Do you believe that there are more and that it's understood and explainable?
I believe there are more. I think it's important for people to understand that this has been going on since at least 2017. Which is to say these smaller, brightly lit, drone-like vehicles violating restricted U.S. military airspace in sensitive areas around nuclear power facilities, nuclear weapons storage facilities. A year ago today, roughly, this was Langley Air Force Base was taken offline by drones. And that continued that was exactly a year ago this month. And that was about a year after there was a similar sort of pattern in the western United States for several months near some of our ICBM fields. So it's troubling that after all this time, we still haven't captured any of these things. We still haven't brought them down.
Do we
still
know that?
where they're coming from. We are really in a position of ignorance here, and hopefully this will maybe at long last, after all these prior events and the Chinese balloon, get some people to take a hard look at what do we need to do to get our hands on one of these things so we can get to the bottom of this.
Right. I mean, look, Chris,
And-
you know better than I do, but I don't know that they haven't gotten any of them. I would read it another way, just as somebody who's been in the business of deception detection for 25 years, that, you know, that calmness of them being not concerned about it is usually a function of having information. And Ryan, you and I have talked many times about how many stories you've heard about what they did take down or what they found on the ground, and programs that use a lot of money to use special operators to go and recover these things. But SUV-sized drones, I can't find those on the commercial market. I've been looking for days. How do you explain that part? You think people just get the size wrong, Ryan?
Well, you know, there always is some uncertainty when it comes to judging a moving object in the sky, especially at night and especially as a single source of light. But these things appear to be close enough to the ground where I think I have pretty high confidence in the size predictions that they're estimating, give or take 20%. But, you know, these sizes and these types of behaviors are something that we've seen and we've talked about, Chris, over the years, starting at Virginia Beach, working its way further north into the Langley area, and perhaps now into New Jersey. I don't think we can conclusively say that they're inherently linked necessarily, but with the mixed messages that we're getting between the legislative branch and between the executive branch, it really feels like the Biden administration is gaslighting us on the seriousness of this issue.
These are bigger, they're more sophisticated, and they're in places that are invading people's privacy, and some of it is sensitive space. What are you going to do about it?
You know, I think that in general, once President Trump gets back in, I think that they need to, via executive order, and then also have a talk probably with the Joint Chiefs, that if you have something of this size and magnitude that's going into restricted airspace, it should be an automatic shoot down notice, meaning that, you know, there is no questions asked, you go and you get it. And I think part of the issues that we saw with what happened with the Chinese spy balloon that traversed literally the United States, and then, you know, there was rumors that it was collecting information, all of that. The point is that it should have been taken down day one. They should not have allowed that to occur. So I think that's the first part. The second part is, though, from a government perspective, is, you know, we keep funding the DoD, we keep funding studies and programs, but we really need to focus on what we can do to come up with radar systems that can detect this, because frankly, I think we're used to more of an ancient way of warfare, and that, you know, we're looking at picking up large aircraft versus some of these drones that might be smaller and also too might be flying at lower airspaces. So, I mean, it's going to be a lot to unpack there, but I do think it's ridiculous that they're not shooting these things down, or at least trying to capture them to study them, and then that they would gaslight Americans. You can clearly see that that's a drone. So to say otherwise is just, it's a farce.
Actually, this is one of the very reasons why I decided to testify before Congress a few weeks ago, because quite frankly, we don't really have control of our U.S. airspace. We don't have awareness of what are in our skies.
Do you believe that the FBI has been looking for a month and doesn't have any answer about what these are when there's so many?
Well, I've worked with the FBI in the past, and they tend to be very, very competent when they're doing investigations. I do believe they have some answers. I don't think they have all the answers yet. What further makes this more complicated, you have an issue where these things are being seen over civilian airspace, so you have jurisdictional issues, right? You have, from a federal perspective, you have FBI leading the law enforcement investigation, but you also have the Department of Defense. You have folks like the U.S. Air Force and Office of Special Investigations. You have DHS and even the FAA. And so all these federal agencies, forget about even the state and local agencies, are trying to work together and try to deconflict what's in the skies. And unfortunately, they just don't seem to have a common operating picture right now of exactly what we're dealing with.
Coming up, the New Jersey witness who says he saw an object the size of a school bus. This week, my colleague Dan Abrams obtained a very interesting interview with a New Jersey local who saw and filmed an object he says was the size of a school bus. It's very interesting in light of assurances from the White House that most of what they're seeing in New Jersey are misidentified aircraft. Try telling it to this local.
Well, I saw a drone. If it was a drone, who knows what it was, but it was not the drone you see people fly. There's the picture. It was the size of a school bus, literally the size of my two-car garage. Well, I have a one-car garage, the size of a two-car garage.
And what happened when you saw it or you started taking pictures, et cetera?
Well, to back up a little bit, I'm coming home from On Patrol Live. It's 12:30 at night, and I get into Montclair, New Jersey, and I see the full moon. And I'm like, well, it can't be a full moon because the full moon was 2 weeks ago. All of a sudden, it's getting closer and closer. And then first, I think it's a plane, then a helicopter. Then it's hovering right over the woods as you're entering Montclair. And it's a drone literally 40 feet wide by 40 feet wide, hovering right over the woods. I pull over, get out of my car, forget about the phone. I'm just like looking at this thing, wondering what the heck it is. Then I said, oh, I should take a picture. I grab my phone, starts, the second it like notices I'm out there, it just starts heading south. Grab the picture. The picture looks like a dot. It looks like, at the very most, like a Plan 9 from outer space flying saucer. But when I got a good close look at it, when it was only about 100 feet off the ground, maybe 150 feet off the ground, it looked like a drone on steroids, like literally a drone the size of a garage.
And you reported it to the authorities?
I got home. The first thing I did is I Googled. I went on X. I went on Instagram. I like, is this a thing? And I saw nothing except one little news report from like Morris County Patch about some drones making noise and keeping people up at night. Nothing. Then, so the next morning I called the FAA, I called the FBI, and still to this day, I've not gotten a response from either of them.
Next up, we answer your questions. Why can't we chase these objects back to source? That's next. Okay, so while we have this crazy situation that the authorities are saying, don't panic, everything's fine, and they have absolutely no idea what's going on, it's quite clear from your questions that you're concerned. So I've decided it'd be quite important for us to try and respond to some of the questions that people are asking. So we'll start off with the first question. How can the Governor, Homeland, FBI say there is no public safety concern with these drones, but they don't know who they are, where they're coming from? If they don't know those simple facts, how can they possibly know their intent? What if they are programmed to go kamikaze on a future date? It's a big national security threat. And that's from @the_Friar Eli. Well, I can tell you, I completely agree with that analysis. They simply can't give any assurance that there is no threat to national security. And possibly the best reason to show that is the statement that was made by retired 4-star General Barry McCaffrey, who told NBC News on the 8th of December, when you see something of this capacity, he's talking about the drones, you wonder why it would be needed and what they are doing. It implies a heavy payload. And he went on to describe these uncrewed aerial vehicles, these UAVs, these drones, or shall we just say these objects, as a, quote, significant threat to US national security. Quote, what concerns us mostly, said a sheriff for Ocean County, Michael Mastronardi, is that at this point, no one has seen any of these units taking off or landing. Right now, we just want to identify what it is. And as you rightly point out, when you have these objects hovering, not only over civilian areas in New Jersey, but also over some of the most sensitive military facilities in the United States, places that, without naming names, I happen to know there are nuclear weapons located. This is a really grave issue. And as this person speculates, these drones are large, they can potentially carry a payload. What assurances do we have that they're not being forward deployed for some kind of future operation? Okay, the next one from @Odin1028. Ross, I'd like to know how it's possible that these things haven't been tracked back to their source. Great question. Seems to me that if they are conventional, that is, they do not exhibit hypersonic speed or advanced radar cloaking, it would be a simple task. Absolutely, especially considering how long they've been up at this, and they always seem to be in the same place. Something doesn't add up here. Well, look, I don't want to sound like I'm blowing our own trumpet, but we warned months ago that there was something absolutely ridiculous about the official drones explanation for what's been seen over, for example, the Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. These drone sightings, so-called, go back many, many months. In fact, they go back years. And you know what I think has been happening here? I think that the Department of Defense and the various agencies like Homeland Security, they've been hoping that this might resolve itself. They've been using the explanation that these are foreign adversary drones, possibly Russian. And the way it works for somebody like me as a journalist, there's a lot of backgrounding from intelligence officials. So they won't go on the record, and the excuse is because they don't want to escalate things with Russia or China. But what they'll say is, oh, look, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we adversary drones. They're Russian organised crime gangs in the UK flying them over UK bases. They're perhaps Russian ships from across over the horizon deploying these drones into the east coast of the United States. I'm sorry, that just doesn't wash. I'm getting reports on these objects from places like Arkansas, the Midwest, over military facilities, close to it, adjacent to military facilities. These objects are being reported in New Zealand, in my country, Australia. A guy has just sent me just overnight images of these objects over Sydney Airport. Nobody is able to explain how a foreign adversary power is able to deploy these objects over so many countries in the world. Oh, and by the way, I've had people from Russia send me their descriptions of what they're seeing in Russia, near sensitive military bases in Russia. If this is Russia, why are these objects manifesting themselves over Russia? Same with China. Coming up, you've heard the evidence. Now, what do we think is really going on? And why is every agency of government so unforthcoming? That's next. So thank you for joining us this evening. You've heard the evidence, you've seen the evidence from locals, and frankly, the thing I find most shocking is the inability of just about every federal government agency to give us any kind of an answer. The White House, the Department of Defense, the FBI, all of the agencies we entrust to reassure us about national security and public safety are not giving us any confidence at all that they have any answers. How can the White House national security spokesman give any assurance that there is no national security or public safety threat when, frankly, they admit they know absolutely nothing at all? We're going to keep on pursuing this issue for you like a dog on a bone here on NewsNation and on my show Reality Check, which you can also find on YouTube. The conversation continues. Go to @NewsNation on X, formerly known as Twitter, where I will be holding a live spaces. And we'll keep you posted in coming days and weeks as more comes to light. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ross Coulthart. See you soon.